Welcome, everyone. Today, we're diving into a genuinely terrifying rahasyaka visleshan, an analysis of a mystery that absolutely blurs the line between a chilling true crime investigation and the deeply paranormal. We are opening up a very dark case file today, focusing on the bizarre events that went down at the Royal Crescent. Now picture this. It's a massive British-era heritage hotel right in Kolkata. Think long, shadowy corridors, creaky ancient staircases, and these huge, imposing paintings staring down at you. Honestly, it's the perfect setting for a historical deep dive. But as we're about to uncover together, the history buried beneath this particular hotel absolutely refused to stay hidden. We're going to logically break down the whole timeline, the strange forensic evidence, and the horrifying climax of what is known as the Last Offering. Our story kicks off with a 26-year-old housekeeper named Rupa. She'd literally only been working at the Royal Crescent for a few days when her life changed forever. She was working the night shift, wandering the dead quiet halls of the second floor when she completely froze outside the honeymoon suite. From inside that room, she heard this strange, heavy, dragging sound. Really unsettling, right? Concerned, she knocked on the door. Silence. She knocked again, calling out, "Hello, sir, anybody there, room service?" But still, nobody answered. Now, Rupa knew for a fact the hotel records showed this specific room as completely vacant. So, taking a deep breath, she swiped her MasterCard and slowly pushed the door open. And that brings us to Phase 1, the first murder at the Royal Crescent. This impossible crime scene she stumbled upon basically sets the stage for everything that follows in this terrifying investigation. Okay, let's dive into this gruesome scene. When Rupa stepped into that bedroom, it was like walking into a nightmare. Right in the dead center of the room, a body was literally suspended in midair. The victim's hands and feet were tied with heavy ropes attached to the four corners of the bed. But here is the most horrifying detail. The body was completely headless, cleanly decapitated from the neck down, with blood actively dripping onto the floor below. And the corpse was just slowly swinging in the air, exactly like a gruesome, incomplete pendulum. Obviously, Rupa screamed, ran out into the corridor, and immediately alerted the hotel staff and the police. You know, it's actually fascinating to note how a scene like this mirrors what we often see in modern suspense media. This whole headless victim scenario, especially when it's tied to complex multi-murder mysteries, is a pretty well-known trope. For instance, if you've seen the Z5 series Brown, it features a strikingly similar narrative arc involving decapitations and dark rituals. It really begs the question for the investigators at the time: were they dealing with a copycat serial killer inspired by fiction, some sort of localized urban legend, or an actual organized black magic ritual? Let's move on to Phase 2, terrifying clues and the old box. Because right after that traumatic discovery, while the police began their official work, the horror actually started targeting Rupa directly. The very next night, things escalated fast. Rupa was fast asleep in the staff quarters when she jolted awake. The time? Exactly 3 a.m. Right outside her door, she heard it again, that exact same heavy, dragging sound from the honeymoon suite. She listened as it slowly moved down the corridor and stopped dead right outside her room. Then came 3 loud, deliberate knocks. Thack, thack, thack. Absolutely terrified, Rupa peeked at the gap under her door. And what she saw literally defies all logic. She saw a pair of human feet, but they were completely reversed. Like the person standing there was facing backward. She was too paralyzed to even scream. Eventually, the feet just dragged away into the dark. And get this, when she frantically reported this the next morning, the hotel management completely blew her off. They just dismissed it, blaming it all on the trauma of what she saw the previous night. Now, what's really interesting about this slide is the physical evidence Rupa uncovered just a couple of days later. She was cleaning out this old, dusty storage room when she found an antique wooden box. It was covered in these deeply unsettling symbols, specifically a circle containing an eye, totally surrounded by handprints. Obviously, curiosity got the better of her and she opened it. Inside, she found a stack of ancient black and white photographs. But these weren't your typical vintage pictures. They showed people dressed in heavy black robes wearing bizarre masks. And in the center of one photo, a woman, bound hand and foot, hanging in midair. Exactly like the victim in the honeymoon suite, she was completely headless. And scrawled on the back of this specific photograph was just one single word, Adapan, which translates to sacrifice. Understandably terrified, Rupa handed the box and the photos straight over to the police, which kicks off our next major breakthrough, Phase 3, the 1941 basement and the diary. Guided by those strange symbols, the police decided to do a deep sweep of the hotel's architecture. Tracing this hotel's history backward reveals a really chilling timeline. Down below the hotel, the police actually uncovered a hidden British-era basement that had been permanently sealed off since 1941. Digging through the historical records, they realized that a decade before that, way back in 1931, a secret society was formed right on this property. For over 80 years, that basement sat completely untouched in the dark. That is, until the present day when Rupa arrived for her new job and the violent killings inexplicably started up again. When the police finally broke down that heavy, sealed basement door, the scene inside was straight out of a horror movie. The walls were plastered with the exact same symbols Rupa had found carved on that wooden box. Right in the middle of the room was this massive stone altar, and scattered all around it, human bones. Forensic experts quickly tested them and determined these bones were roughly 70 to 80 years old. But the absolute holy grail of this search, the most crucial piece of evidence they pulled from the dust, was an old, weathered diary. A diary that laid out the entire dark history of this cult. Let's decode this in Phase 4, the cult ritual and the truth of Arpan. Through the pages of this diary, we can actually understand the exact mechanics, the strange terminology, and the totally twisted motivations of this powerful secret society. You see, the diary kept using that same word Rupa found on the back of the photograph, Arpan. Now, traditionally, Arpan means a sacrifice or an offering. But this term was uniquely twisted by the wealthy elites running this 1931 secret society. For them, it wasn't a spiritual offering at all. It became their official, sanitized code word for their grim, highly systematic human rituals. So the crucial point is just how chillingly systematic they were about documenting their crimes. The diary literally outlined a strict, factual, 4-step procedure for this Arpan. Step 1, a young woman was carefully selected. Step 2, her hands and feet were securely tied. Step 3, she was hoisted up and hung suspended in midair. And step 4, she was decapitated. Seeing it broken down like this is just wild. It completely transforms what might sound like a chaotic local ghost story into a highly structured, terrifying forensic analysis of an organized cult. But just as the police felt they were getting answers, they hit a wall of absolute dread. On the very last page of the diary, scrawled across the paper, was this haunting promise. Until the final offering is complete, they will keep returning. This wasn't just some historical record anymore. It was a very real looming threat hanging right over the present-day hotel. Which brings us to our final chapter, Phase 5, Antim Arpan and the Unsolved Mystery. Armed with this horrifying truth, Rupa decided she was out. She planned to quit her job first thing in the morning. But tragically, she would never see the sunrise. Let's map out Rupa's final night. She finished her shift and was speed walking back to her room when she felt a heavy presence following her down the long corridor. She whipped around, but nothing. The hall was empty. However, when she finally opened the door to her own room, she wasn't alone. Waiting for her were 5 figures, dressed head to toe in those exact black robes and masks from the 1930s photographs. And horrifyingly, each of those figures was holding a rotting, severed woman's head. Rupa screamed her lungs out and bolted back into the hotel corridors. Completely alone, she was chased by these dark figures until, in a total blind panic, she burst into a random empty room, slammed the lock, and frantically dialed the police. As she hung up the phone, a chilling realization hit her. She recognized the layout of the room she had blindly run into. And this brilliantly illustrates a truly tragic symmetry in this case. Think back to that very first murder we talked about, an unknown victim in the honeymoon suite, tied to the 4 corners of the bed, headless and swinging. Well, when the police finally arrived with sirens blaring and broke down the heavily locked door of that honeymoon suite, they found the exact same scene. But this time, the victim tied to the 4 corners, headless and slowly swinging in the air, was Rupa. The police were entirely too late. The cult from 1931 had finally closed the dark loop they started decades ago. Smeared in fresh blood across the pristine wall of the honeymoon suite were the words, Antim Arpan, the final offering. That horrifying prophecy written in the basement diary, it had actually been fulfilled. Following this undeniable tragedy, the police finally believed Rupa's initial reports, but the damage was done. The hotel was immediately shut down and sealed off as a massive crime scene. But without any further physical evidence to prove who exactly was hiding behind those masks, the trail just went cold. Now, interestingly enough, a few years later, the building was bought out, completely renovated, and quietly reopened under a totally different name.
But that leaves us with an incredibly chilling, provocative question. Because local legends heavily insist that the haunting never actually stopped. If the final offering was truly completed, then who or what is the headless spirit that modern guests still claim to see wandering the dark corridors of the newly reopened hotel? Is it Rupa, or is the cult still waiting in the shadows? Thank you so much for joining me for this explanator. Keep questioning what's hidden beneath the surface.